The camera is already running when the cruiser door slams. It is 6 minutes past 9 on a January morning, and the old man on the sidewalk outside Halverson's Hardware has both hands raised, palms open, the way a person does when he has nothing to give and is being asked for it anyway. His cane lies in the gutter. The officer standing over him has just kicked it there. The phone in the truck across the street keeps recording, steady, the lens catching everything. And the German shepherd in the passenger seat has gone rigid against the glass. Cole Maddox saw the cane go into the gutter before he understood what he was watching. He had pulled the truck to the curb to let the engine warm and to read a hand-drawn map a gas station clerk had sketched on a napkin. He was not from Ferran County. He had no business in it. The dog beside him, a working shepherd named Juno, had stiffened a full second before the kick ears swiveling toward the sound of a raised voice. And Cole had learned over 6 years never to ignore that. Juno moved first. Cole followed her gaze and saw the rest. If a story like this stays with you, stay with it to the end. What you are about to watch turned on a thing nobody expected to matter. The officer was young, maybe 30, broad through the shoulders, with a haircut so fresh the skin above his ears still showed pale. His name tape read Brandt. He stood with his thumbs hooked in his belt, talking down at the old man in a voice pitched to carry, and the old man was not answering. He was only holding his hands up and looking at the cane in the gutter as if it were a long way off and getting farther. A thin crust of ice glazed the concrete. The wind came straight down the main street of the town of Cedar Junction, carrying the cold off the flat fields beyond, and the few people on the sidewalk had found reasons to look at their boots. Cole did not get out of the truck right away. That surprised him later when he had time to think about it. 6 years of pulling people out of floodwater and collapsed houses had taught him to move first and feel afterward, but something about the scene held him still for the length of 3 breaths. He watched the officer bend, pick up the cane, and turn it over in his hands like a man appraising a tool he meant to keep. He watched the old man's mouth move just barely, forming a word that did not reach the truck. He watched Brandt set the cane against the brick wall of the hardware store well out of reach and say something that made the old man lower his hands and go very still. Then Cole reached over, made sure the phone was wedged upright in the dashboard vent where it had been filming the whole time, and got out. The cold hit him the way it always did, clean and total, a cold that did not negotiate. He left Juno in the truck with the window cracked 2 inches and crossed the street at an unhurried pace, hands loose at his sides, the way you approach a frightened animal or an armed man. Brandt heard his boots and turned. "Help you with something," Brandt said. "It was not a question. Just checking on him," Cole said. He nodded at the old man without taking his eyes off the officer. "He all right? This is a police matter." The old man spoke then, for the first time, loud enough to hear. "I told him I have the papers at home." His voice was dry and steady, an old man's voice that had given up being surprised by things. "I told him I can show him the registration. He says the cane has a blade in it." "It's a sword cane," Brandt said. "Concealed weapon, I'm seizing it. Pending investigation." Cole looked at the cane against the wall. It was a plain thing. Dark, wood, worn, pale. At the grip, a rubber tip on the bottom gone soft and gray with use. He had seen 1,000 canes like it in VA waiting rooms and church basements. "I have reason to believe it is. You pull the handle?" Brandt's jaw moved. "I don't have to explain my procedure to you." The old man's hands had begun to shake. Not from fear, Cole thought, but from the simple cost of standing without the cane. He was tall and had been taller, stooped now into a question mark, with white hair combed back from a high forehead and a face mapped by 70 odd winters. He wore a canvas cork coat buttoned to the throat, and work boots laced with the patience of a man who could no longer bend easily. One hand had found the brick wall and was pressing against it, holding him up. "He needs the cane to stand," Cole said. "There's a process. Then walk him through the process. Pull the handle right now. Show us the blade, and I'll get out of your way." For a moment the two of them stood in the cold and looked at each other, and the old man looked between them, and the wind kept coming down the street. Brant's hand drifted toward the cane and stopped. He glanced once at the truck across the street, at the shape of the dog in the window, and something in his face recalculated. "I'll be filing a report," Brant said. "You can pick it up at the station with the proper documentation." He took the cane, got into his cruiser, and pulled away from the curb without checking his mirror, and the old man sagged against the wall and would have gone down if Cole had not caught his arm. That was how Cole Maddox met Walter Osei, and how a morning he had meant to spend driving through Farron County and out the other side became something else entirely. He got the old man inside the hardware store, where a propane heater roared in the corner, and a woman behind the counter came around fast, with a folding chair. Her name was Donna Halverson, and she had run the store since her husband died, and she knew Walter the way everyone in a small town knows everyone. She brought him coffee in a paper cup, and stood with her arms crossed, and her mouth a hard line. "That's the third one this month," she said to no one in particular. Cole looked up. "Third what?" Donna glanced at the door, then at the windows, then back at Cole, and lowered her voice the way people do when the walls have started feeling thin. "Third thing. Brant's taken off somebody who couldn't stop him. Took a fishing boat off the Pruitt place, said it was abandoned property. Took Earl Sutton's truck for a registration thing, and it never came back. Now, a cane." She shook her head. "You from the county, passing through? Then you don't want any part of this," she said. But she said it the way a person says a thing they hope will be ignored. Walter held the coffee in both hands and did not drink it. He looked at Cole with pale eyes gone wet at the rims from the cold. "I am obliged to you," he said, "but she's right. You should go on." Cole did not go on. He told himself, sitting in that warm corner with the heater roaring, that he would stay one night, make sure the old man got home safe, and find out about the cane. He had nowhere he had to be. He had been driving for 11 months by then, since the work ran out and the apartment lease ended, and the silence in the rooms got to be more than he wanted to sit inside, and one direction was as good as another. He did not yet know that the cane mattered more than a cane should. He did not yet know what Walter Osei had carried inside that hollow wooden shaft for 40 years. Pull back from that street, then, to understand the man who stayed. Cole was 41 years old, a former Marine who had spent his enlistment with the engineers and the years after with a disaster relief outfit that went where hurricanes and floods and earthquakes had been. He was built thick through the chest and shoulders, with forearms ropey from a life of lifting, and he carried himself with the economy of a man who had learned that wasted motion got people hurt. His hair had gone iron gray at the temples, and he kept it short. A pale scar ran along the line of his left jaw, where a sheet of corrugated roofing had caught him during a rescue in a place he no longer named. His eyes were the kind that never fully stopped moving, marking doors, marking exits, marking the hands of strangers. He had pulled more people from wreckage than he could count, and he had learned somewhere along the way that the ones who lived were not always the ones who deserved it most, only the ones somebody had reached in time. He did not smile easily. When he did, It changed his whole face, and people were always a little surprised by it. He had grown up 2 states over on land that did not belong to his family anymore, and he had learned young that places disappeared too easily, that you could love a thing and still lose it to men who arrived with paperwork and patience. His father had been a mechanic and a deacon, and a hard man who softened only around dogs. His mother had kept a garden and a Bible and had died the spring. Cole turned 19 while he was at Paris Island and could not get home. He had not put down roots since. Roots, in his experience, were what people pulled up when they wanted to take everything else with them. Juno had come to him 4 years back, washed out of a police K-9 program for being too independent, too willing to make her own decisions. She was a large shepherd, black and tan, with a dense coat and a long bushy tail and one ear that had a small notch in it from a fight before his time. She read people the way Cole read structures, fast, and from the foundation up, and she was almost never wrong. She had not liked Brant. She had liked Walter immediately, which Cole noticed because Juno did not give her liking away cheaply. That first night, Cole drove Walter home in the truck with Juno's head resting on the old man's knee the whole way. Walter lived 4 miles out of town on a county road, in a small white farmhouse, with a sagging porch and a barn that had not held animals in years. There was a garden gone to frost-blackened stalks, a woodpile under a blue tarp, and a wheelchair ramp somebody had built years ago, the lumber gone silver. Inside, the house was clean and spare and cold. A wood stove sat in the front room, unlit. Photographs covered the walls, dozens of them, black and white and color, a long life pinned up where it could be seen. Cole lit the stove without being asked. He found split wood on the porch and kindling in a brass scuttle and had a fire going inside 10 minutes. Working with the unthinking competence of a man who had warmed 100 cold rooms for strangers, and Walter watched him do it from the chair by the window with an expression Cole could not read. The first heat rolled out of the iron, and the house began slowly to remember what warmth was. The frost on the inside of the window panes went to beads, then to water, then to nothing. Photographs on the walls came up out of the dimness, one by one, as the firelight reached them. "You do that like a man who's done it for somebody before," Walter said. "My father." Cole shut the stove door and adjusted the damper. He had a thing about cold houses. Said a cold house meant somebody'd stopped caring. Walter was quiet for a while. The fire took hold and began to throw light. "My wife used to say something like that," he said. "She passed in the fall, 3 years now." He looked at the photographs on the wall, and Cole understood that the woman in most of them, dark-eyed and laughing in the older ones, careworn and gentle in the later ones, was her. Her name was Adaze. People here called her Addie. She kept this house warm 41 years, the same number as Cole's age. He did not say so. He stayed that night on the couch with Juno on the floor beside him, and in the morning he made coffee in the old percolator and found Walter already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a shoebox in front of him and the lid off. Inside were papers, brittle and yellowed, folded and refolded so many times the creases had gone soft as cloth. Walter did not show him what they were. He only sat with his hands flat on the table on either side of the box, the way a man sits with something he has decided to tell. "The cane was my father's," Walter said. "He carried it out of a place that doesn't exist on any map you'd find now. Carried it across an ocean. There's nothing inside it but air and a little roll of paper I put there myself, years back, when I didn't trust banks and didn't trust safes and didn't trust anybody but Addie." He looked up. "That officer, didn't take a weapon. He took the only thing I've got that proves what this land is, and whose it is, and what was promised on it. Cole set the coffee down slowly. "What's on the paper?" "A deed," Walter said, "and a letter. And the reason a man named Garrett Voss has been trying to buy this road out from under all of us for 2 years. Stay with this. The cane was never the point. The cane was where the point was hidden." Over the following days, the shape of it came clear. The way a thing underwater clarifies as you wait for the silt to settle. Garrett Voss ran a company called Meridian Land Partners out of an office 2 counties over. And for 2 years he had been acquiring the farms along the county road, one at a time. He paid below value and he paid fast, and he found the families who were tired or sick or behind on something, and he made the kind of offer that feels like rescue right up until you understand it was a wreck. The Pruitts had sold. The Suttons were close. Walter's farmhouse and the 40 acres behind it sat in the middle of the stretch Voss wanted, and Walter would not sell. And so the trouble had started small and grown. It had started with a survey crew Walter never hired, walking his back fence line, then a notice about an easement nobody could find the original of. Then Officer Brandt, who turned out to be married to Voss's sister, finding reasons to stop by a tail light, a burn barrel ordinance, and now a cane. Cole learned this in pieces, sitting in Donna Halverson's store, walking the frozen back acres with Juno ranging ahead, listening at the diner where the old men drank coffee and went quiet when a stranger sat down and then slowly did not. He was good at this part. Disaster work had taught him that the people who knew the most were usually the ones who had decided it was safer to know nothing, and that the way through was patience, not pressure. He did not push. He fixed Donna's broken door hinge with a screwdriver from his truck in 2 minutes of work, and Donna watched him do it and said nothing, though the next morning there was a thermos of coffee waiting on the counter with his name on a strip of masking tape. He split a winter's wood for a widow named Fay, who lived behind the church, a small, straight-backed woman of 70 with reading glasses pushed up into white hair and a way of looking at a man over the top of them that took inventory. She brought him a plate of cornbread while he worked and stood in the cold to ask him 3 careful questions about where he came from, and when his answers held up, she asked a 4th, which was whether he had met the Osei man, and the way she said the name told Cole she had been waiting for someone to ask. He let the town look at him until it decided he was not one of Voss's men, and then the town began to talk. It talked the way small towns talk, sideways in the gaps between other subjects. A man at the diner named Hollis, who had farmed the parcel north of the Pruitts before he sold, set down his coffee one morning and told Cole, without being asked about the survey crew that had walked his fence the week before, Meridian's offer arrived, men in new boots with a tablet computer, measuring a line nobody had questioned in 50 years. Another morning, Donna told him about Earl Sutton's truck, how Brandt had stopped Earl for a cracked mirror, found a registration discrepancy, and impounded the truck, and how the impound fees had climbed past what the truck was worth until Earl signed it over, and how 3 weeks after that Earl signed Meridian's offer too. Because a farmer without a truck is a farmer who has already started to lose. The pieces did not announce themselves. They arrived like silt settling, one slow grain at a time, until Cole could see the bottom. The deed to Walter's land was old, older than the county records office, which had burned in 1961 and been reconstructed from memory and guesswork. When the records were rebuilt, a clerk had drawn the property lines as best anyone could, and the lines he drew put a strip of Walter's road frontage, the part where it met the state highway, into a parcel of record that showed no clear owner. On paper, that strip belonged to no one. In truth, it had belonged to Walter's father since before the fire, and the proof of it was the original deed, the one with the surveyor's seal and the county's old stamp, the one Walter had rolled up tight and slid into a hollow cane for safekeeping because his father had told him a deed in a bank was a deed somebody could find. Voss had figured out the gap in the record. If he could claim that strip of frontage, Walter's farm would have no legal access to the highway, and a farm you cannot reach is a farm worth nothing, and a man with a worthless farm sells. The cane held the one document that closed the gap, and Brant had taken the cane. "He doesn't know what's in it," Cole said. He and Walter were at the kitchen table again, and Juno lay across the doorway with her chin on her paws, watching them both. If he knew, he'd have opened it already and burned the paper. He took it on a guess. He took it because Voss told him to make your life hard, and the cane was what was in his hand. "Then we have a little time," Walter said. "We have until he gets curious." The black moment came on a Tuesday, 9 days in, and it came the way these things do, all at once, and from a direction nobody was watching. Cole drove into town for fence wire and came back to find a county vehicle in Walter's drive and a man in a sport coat standing on the porch with a clipboard and a smile that did not reach his eyes. Garrett Voss was 50, soft in the middle, with manicured hands and a voice like warm oil, and he had brought a document that he laid on the porch rail as gently as a man laying down a winning card. "Mr. Spatchen." "Oh, say," Voss was saying as Cole came up the steps, "I want you to understand this isn't personal. The county has determined that the access strip along your frontage is unowned land, and Meridian has filed to take title to it. That's all settled. What I'm offering you now is a courtesy, a fair price for the rest, before the access situation makes the rest impossible to sell to anyone but me." He smiled. "I'd hate to see you stranded out here." Juno had not made a sound, but she had risen, and she stood at the top of the steps with her weight forward and her ears flat, and Voss took one step back without seeming to know he had done it. "He has the deed," Cole said. Voss looked at him for the first time, taking his measure, filing him away. "And you are a friend of his." "Well, friend, there is no deed. The original record's burned 60-some years ago. I've had 3 attorneys confirm it. There is no document in existence that establishes private ownership of that strip, and I have a filing that says so, and the clock on it runs out in 11 days. He picked up his clipboard. "I'm a reasonable man. The offer's good through the end of the month. After that, I'm afraid the road decides for all of us." He drove away. Walter stood on the porch holding the porch rail with both hands, and the document Voss had left fluttered against the wood, and Cole picked it up and read it and felt the cold go all the way down. Voss was right about the timeline. There was a window, a legal window, and it was closing, and the one thing that could stop it was rolled inside a cane in the evidence room of a man who answered to Voss's family. 11 days, Walter said, "and I cannot even prove the cane is mine, because the receipt he gave me lists it as a sword cane, contraband, no owner of record." He laughed, a dry sound with no bottom to it. "He took my proof and gave me a piece of paper that says the proof never existed." That night, Cole sat on the cold porch with Juno pressed warm against his leg and did the hardest thing the work had ever taught him, which was to not act. Every instinct he had was telling him to drive to the station and take the cane back. He had taken worse risks for less. Yet a cane taken back by force was a cane that proved nothing, a chain of evidence broken, a story Voss could rewrite any way he liked. The only way the deed inside it would ever matter was if the cane came back into the light clean, through a door no one could say had been forced. He had seen it before, in the aftermath of storms, the way a man's hurry to fix a thing could break it past fixing, the way the right answer was so often the slow one. Juno shifted against him and let out a long breath through her nose, and he put a hand on her ribs and felt them rise and fall, and he made himself sit with the waiting until the waiting became a plan. And then he remembered the phone and the dashboard vent. He had not thought about it in 9 days. It had been recording the whole time on that first morning, propped where he had wedged it, and he had never stopped it, never looked at it, had driven Walter home that night and forgotten the thing entirely until this moment on the cold porch. He went to the truck. The phone was dead, the battery long gone. He charged it on the cab adapter with his heart going harder than he wanted to admit. And when it woke up, there was a video file, 11 minutes long, time-stamped and dated, and he sat in the dark cab and watched it. It was all there. Brant kicking the cane into the gutter, Brant picking it up, turning it over, examining it, Walter with his hands raised, saying he had the registration at home, Brant setting the cane against the wall out of reach. And then, near the end, after Cole had crossed the street and the two of them had talked, a thing Cole had not seen because his back had been to the cruiser. Brant, getting into the car with the cane, had pulled the handle. The video caught it, small but clear. The officer twisting the grip, finding it would not come free, finding there was no blade, and then putting the cane in the car anyway. He had known within 30 seconds that it was not a weapon, and he had taken it, regardless. The dog had been right about him on the first morning. The camera had only confirmed it. Cole did not sleep. By the gray of the next dawn, he had a plan. And it was not a plan that involved him driving to the station, because a stranger with a video and a grievance is a man who gets a door shut in his face. It involved the town. It involved Donna Halverson, who had watched 3 things get taken and said the word out loud, and Fay behind the church, whose late husband had been a county judge, and the old man at the diner who had gone quiet and then not quiet, and a woman named Reyes, who was the only sheriff's deputy in the county not related to anyone, and who, it turned out, had been keeping her own quiet list of Brant's seizures for the better part of a year, waiting for the one she could prove. This is the part the title promised, and here is how it came. Cole did not go to Reyes first. He went to Walter, and he laid it out, and Walter listened with his hands flat on the table, and Juno's chin on his knee, and at the end, Walter said the thing that Cole would carry with him long after he left Farron County. "My father carried that cane out of a burning country," Walter said, so that a piece of paper could not be the only thing standing between a man and his home. He was wrong about one thing. The paper matters. It is not the only thing, though. The people who will stand up are the other thing. He looked at Cole. "You are the other thing. So is she behind the church. So is Donna. Go get them." So Cole went and got them. He showed Donna the video on the charged phone in the back room of the hardware store, and Donna's hard mouth went harder, and she made a list of every date she could remember a thing going missing. He showed Fay, who pulled a box of her husband's old county papers down from a closet and found, in an afternoon of dust and reading glasses, a 1958 tax assessment that referenced the Osage frontage as a deeded private parcel, predating the fire, a thread that did not prove the deed but pointed straight at where it had been. He found Reyes off duty at the diner and slid into the booth across from her and put the phone on the table and pressed play and watched a year of patience settle into something hard and certain in her face. "I've been waiting for one I could take upstairs," Reyes said quietly when the video ended. Everything before this, it was his word against an old man's or his word against a dead record. This is him. This is his hand on the cane, finding out it's nothing taking it anyway. With a date on it, she looked at Cole. "Where's the cane now?" "Evidence room. Logged as a sword cane contraband, pending investigation." "Which means there's a chain of custody log with his signature on it, and an evidence locker that doesn't open without a request that gets recorded." Reyes almost smiled. He locked his own lie in a box and signed for it. The days that followed were not loud. There was no confrontation in the street, no fire, no chase. There was a woman driving 2 counties over to file a complaint with a state agency that handled exactly this and had been looking for a clean case to make an example of. Reyes made the drive on her day off in her own car, with the copied video and the notarized statements on the seat beside her in a manila folder. And she sat across a desk from a man named Albright in the state office who had spent 11 years watching rural seizures fall apart for want of proof. And she watched his face change when the 11 minutes of video played on his monitor. There was Fay, who pulled a box of her late husband's old county papers down from a closet, the dust rising in the slant of afternoon light, and who spent 2 days at her kitchen table with her reading glasses and a magnifying lens until she found, folded inside a court calendar from another decade, a 1958 tax assessment that referenced the Osage frontage as a deeded private parcel, predating the fire. A thread that did not prove the deed, but pointed straight at where it had been. There was Donna, who wrote out every date she could remember a thing going missing in the careful hand of a woman who had kept a store's books for 30 years, and who signed it and had it notarized at the bank and handed it to Reyes without a word because the words had all been used up. All of it was copied and notarized and put into hands that knew what to do with it. There was a state investigator who came quietly, a thin, patient man who parked an unmarked sedan outside the sheriff's office and asked to see the chain of custody log, and a 40-year-old deed that came out of an evidence box in front of 3 witnesses, done rolled with shaking hands by a man who had thought he might never see it again. Walter's fingers trembled as the paper opened. The surveyor's seal was still crisp, the old county stamp still readable, the property line drawn clear and true through the strip of frontage that Garrett Voss had sworn 3 attorneys could prove belonged to no one. The investigator looked at it for a long moment, then at Brandt's signature on the evidence log, then at the date, and he said, "Only well in," voice of a man who has found the last piece of something. Voss did not stand in a courtroom and crumble. Men like him rarely do. He withdrew the Meridian filing the day before the state investigator's letter reached his attorney, and he sold his interest in the road to a holding company in another state. And he was, within a month, simply gone from Ferrand County the way weather goes, leaving the ground changed and himself unaccountable. The filing, though, was dead. The strip of frontage was recorded at last and correctly as part of the Osage land, deed number and seal and date entered into the rebuilt records with the original document beside it, so that no fire and no clerk's guess could ever unmake it again. Cole drove Walter to the records office himself the morning the new entry was certified, and he stood by the door with Juno, while a clerk half Walter's age slid a certified copy across the counter, and Walter took it and folded it once and put it inside his coat over his heart and said thank you in a voice that had to work to stay level. And Officer Brandt, whose hand was on the cane in 11 minutes of time-stamped video, was placed on leave and then charged, not by Cole, not by force, but through the slow, certain machinery of a deputy who had kept a list and waited for the day she could use it. He did not go quietly, and he did not go loudly. He went the way men like him go when the paperwork finally turns and faces them, which is alone and surprised, and certain to the end that someone else was to blame. The cane came home on a Thursday in February when the first soft patches of mud were showing through the snow. Ray's brought it herself, released from evidence, and she set it in Walter's hands on the porch, and Walter held it the way a man holds something he has grieved. He did not pull the handle to show them the deed. The deed was already filed, already safe, already part of the record, in a way it had never been before. He only held the cane and leaned on it and stood up straight for the first time in days. Cole had meant to leave by then. He had said so the way he always said so, the words automatic by now. He had a truck and a dog, and 11 months of one direction being as good as another. The morning the cane came home, though, Walter sent him out to the barn for a reason that turned out to be no reason at all, and when Cole pulled the door open, he found that someone had been at work inside. The old wheelchair ramp lumber had been hauled out. There was a cot, a stove, a workbench, the beginnings of a small, clean room built into the corner of a barn that had stood empty for years. Donna's truck tracks were in the mud outside. Faye's husband's old tools were on the bench. The whole town, it turned out, had decided something about Cole before Cole had decided it about himself. He stood in the barn for a long time. Juno walked the length of it, nose down, reading the history of who had been there. And then she came back and sat down in the middle of the new clean space and looked at him, and her tail moved once across the swept floor. Walter was on the porch when Cole came back across the yard. The old man had the cane in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, and the wood stove smoke was rising straight up into a windless gray sky, and the photographs were visible through the window behind him. A whole life pinned up where it could be seen. "You don't have to stay," Walter said. "A man should never have to. The barn's there if you want it, though, and the dog's already moved in, I think." He nodded at Juno, who had followed Cole out, and was now lying on the porch boards, with the deliberate ownership of an animal that has chosen its ground. She decided a while back. She was just waiting on you. Cole looked at the barn and the smoke, and the old man leaning on the cane that had crossed an ocean. He thought about all the places that had disappeared too easily, the ones he had loved and lost, and the ones he had left before they could leave him. He thought about his father lighting a stove against the cold, because a cold house meant somebody had stopped caring. The pressure in his chest tightened, and for once he did not look away from it. "I'll stay through the spring," he said. "See how the garden does?" Walter smiled, slow and knowing, the smile of a man who had heard a younger man tell himself a smaller truth than the one he meant. "Through the spring," he agreed. "We'll see." The garden did well that year. The strip of frontage stayed in the record where it belonged. Brandt's case ran its course through the courts, and Voss's name turned up, now and again, in other counties, other roads. Same patient wreckage, dressed as rescue, but never again on that road, because that road had learned. Donna kept the store, Faye kept the church warm, Reyes made sergeant, and the cane leaned by the door of the white farmhouse, where an old man could reach it, plain dark, wood-worn pale at the grip, holding nothing inside it anymore but air, because the thing it had carried for 40 years was finally safe in the light. Here is what stays with me about this, and maybe it will stay with you. There are men in this world who arrive with smiles and paperwork and the patience to wait you out, who know that the tired and the old and the alone are easiest to move, and who count on no one looking. And there are the others. The ones who notice, the ones who keep a list, or fix a hinge, or charge a dead phone in the dark because something in them will not let a wrong stand unwitnessed. You may not think you are the second kind. Most people are not sure until the morning comes when a cane goes into the gutter in front of them, and they have to choose whether to drive on. The choosing is the whole thing. A camera only sees what is already there. So, when your morning comes, and it will look a little longer than is comfortable, stay a little past the moment you could leave. Light the stove in the cold house. And know that the standing up, the staying, the witnessing, that is the deed. That no fire can burn, and no clerk can lose. May God keep you and the people you have been given to protect. May your house stay warm and your doors stay open to the ones who notice. And may you always be the kind who stops the truck. Stay well, and stay the kind who stays.